About how to pass the Goldman Sachs first round interview. What's up guys, it's Mike from Job Ready English. Now everybody knows Goldman Sachs is a difficult place to get a job at. But what many of you may not realise is that for the first time in their investor day this year in February, Goldman Sachs revealed just how competitive it is to get a job there, sharing that there were 300 applicants for every one job that was advertised at Goldman Sachs. Internships came in as slightly less competitive with only 78 applications per job, thus confirming just how difficult it is to get a job at Goldman Sachs. So in this video, we're going to cover 5 fast facts about Goldman Sachs and 6 questions that you can expect in their first round interview. Stick around until the end when I'm going to break down a winning cover letter for Goldman Sachs so you can get that first round interview, and you'll be able to make a copy of that document right down in the description below. The most important thing that I want to cover before we begin is just how competitive it is to get a job at Goldman Sachs, if you didn't already know, and also just how important it is to be unique. Now, if you watched our last video where we covered Morgan Stanley's interview, we also went through the top 10 most common mistakes that senior recruiters at Morgan Stanley saw when they were taking people through interviews. And the number one mistake was poor research. So the more competitive a job is, the more important it is that your research is really on point so you can stand out from your competition who are going to be reasonably the same as you. And the only way that you can do that is by researching really great answers, putting together good scripts, doing your practice and delivering a phenomenal interview on the day. So let's start off with 5 fast facts about Goldman Sachs. Fact number 1, Goldman Sachs has been in business for over 150 years and was founded in 1869. Fact number 2, Goldman Sachs is ranked as the number 2 investment bank in the world in terms of revenue and is in the top 100 of Fortune 500 companies in the United States, recently coming in at number 55. Fact number 3, in 2022, Goldman Sachs reported revenue of $47 billion and just over $2.5 trillion assets under management. Fact number 5, Goldman Sachs has several notable subsidiaries, including Marcus by Goldman Sachs, Goldman Sachs Personal Financial Management, Goldman Sachs Capital Partners, and Goldman Sachs ICO Personal Financial Management, which have won numerous awards this year. And finally, fact number 5, Goldman Sachs was instrumental in the creation of the commercial paper market in the US and joined the New York Stock Exchange in 1896. If you want 60 more facts about Goldman Sachs, which you can't find on Wikipedia, then make sure you check out the link for the past the interview pack down in the description below. So what's actually going to happen in your Goldman Sachs interview? Well, that depends. If you're watching this as a graduate, then more than likely you're going to have to go through a higher view video interview where you're going to have to sit in front of your computer or your phone, though I recommend your computer, and you're going to have to pre-record your answers based upon questions which are presented to you on the screen. Now, it's safe to assume that you'll have 30 seconds to a minute to prepare and 2 minutes to answer. Now, if you're not a graduate or an intern and you're going for a professional role, it's much more likely you're going to get a HR screener, which is going to be a first round interview with somebody from human resources, but they're probably going to go through the same questions there or thereabouts. So let's go through what are the 6 questions that you can expect to be asked. Now, as ever, in a reflection to the comments, these can change based upon the roles and the location, but this was based on our research, which is included in our past the interview pack, of the last 80 successful interviews for Goldman Sachs that we got through scraping data from the last 3 months. Question number 1, walk me through your CV. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Now, it is so important that you nail your personal introduction, particularly if you're going to be doing an interview on the phone. This is much like doing your elevator pitch. So this is something that you really want to have practiced a lot. If you don't have an interview or you're watching this video now just because you're curious about what you can expect, I highly recommend that you start to refine your personal introduction today. Now, you're going to want to break this down in terms of what you're doing now, what you've done in the past, what you'd like to do in the future, your work experience, extracurricular activities, and finally your skills and interests. Now, a little tip, If you're applying to Goldman Sachs as a professional or to any large business, and you're sort of thinking, well, how should I structure my personal introduction? A really good thing that I like to get people to do is just to encapsulate all their experience in the first sentence. So for example, if I was to introduce myself because I wanted a job as a professional writer, I'd say I have 11 years of writing experience and the content I've written has been viewed by millions of people. In fact, in 2022, it was viewed by over 2 million people. For example, now what you'll notice is that I've quantified everything that I've said. This is so important and such an obvious thing that people miss, particularly in their CVs. If you've sold, how much have you sold? If you manage people, how many people did you manage? If you created reports, how many reports did you create? How many meetings did you go to? What you really want to be thinking about is you want to create a picture that I can see about what you're saying. Don't assume that your interviewer knows what you're talking about. Really go to great lengths to try to explain it in as simple a language as possible. If you're a little bit unsure about whether the script that you're writing or the personal introduction that you're giving is simple enough, then you can use something which I love called Hemingway app, which is just literally hemingway.app. It's a completely free app and it allows you to see what level your English language is being pitched at, and it should really be pitched at grade 4, which is the same as a 10-year-old, and funnily enough is the same language that most of the copy that you read is going to be pitched at, and most of the best-selling books that you read is going to be written at. So in delivering your personal introduction, you really want to move through all of this stuff in 2 minutes, just like we said. And it should be really polished, it should be gripping, it should be something which you can just reel off, and is basically you trying to demonstrate that you have all the experiences and skills that are required. Don't belabor any of the points, just kind of do it like a really quick fact sheet about you that's really going to grab somebody's attention. And you might say, well, do I really have to talk about my hobbies, or do I have to talk about my extracurricular activities? No, of course you don't. You can talk about other things, but what's the most impressive thing that you can put forward to really make your interviewer think this person is unique? That's the most important thing in a competitive environment. You really have to stand out from the crowd. It doesn't have to be the most impressive thing, but it's just something almost like a pattern interrupt that they wouldn't have heard from somebody else. Question number 2, what made you apply for this position? Now this is really similar to why do you want to do this job? Why do you want to work in asset management? Why do you want to work in operations? Why do you want to work in sales and trading? So you're going to want to break down your answer into 2 parts. First of all, you're going to say, well, as part of being in operations, I know that I would have to be involved in reconciliation and settlements. I would have to work as a bridge between the finance team and sales and trading, whatever it is. I don't claim to be a finance expert, okay? What we really want to be doing is just demonstrating that we understand the job. Now, going all the way back to what I said first of all, the senior recruiters at Morgan Stanley genuinely said that the #1 biggest mistake that they see people make is that people just haven't done their research. So really understand the job that you're going to be doing and explain that in 30 to 60 seconds. This is really important for a higher view video interview, because in fact what they're doing is that they are capturing your sound, they are transcribing it to text, and they're then analysing that text for particular keywords. Where are those keywords going to come from? Well, more than likely they're going to come from the job description, and they're going to be looking for you to use particular words and phrases that are included in that job description. Now, the second half of this answer is really your first opportunity to kind of say, this is why I am the best person for the job. Now, a good tip, it's not that you work hard or you're really keen or Goldman Sachs is an amazing place and all of that stuff, which really, as far as I'm concerned, having heard it thousands of times before, it's just filler. You want to say, well, I'm a really good fit for this job because I am really good at talking to clients. I'm good at talking to clients because actually I've worked in a pizza parlor for a year and I had to deal with 20 customers a day when I was delivering pizzas. Now you might be listening to that thinking, well, what has that got to do with client management? It's got everything to do with client management. It's got to do with the fact that you have to communicate, you have to be polite, get information, get payment, resolve conflict. All of this stuff is hyper relevant. Whatever the job it is that you have done and that you're going to do, you can put these 2 things together. Now in a minute, I estimate that you could pick out 2 or 3 really important things for the job and provide the proof to show that you're the right person for the job. Question number 3, why do you want to work for Goldman Sachs? Now, just like I did in 5 fast facts about Goldman Sachs, You really want to pick out facts that you believe are impactful, and more importantly, kind of show the interviewer that you've put in a little bit more than just reading through their Wikipedia page, right? Or just reading through their About Us or the history. I tend to find that if you put in 15 or 20 minutes, maybe you just have a quick flick through their annual report. Maybe you have a look at their media press kit, the recent projects that they've been involved in, deals, awards, ESG projects, charitable giving. This is also an opportunity for you to resonate with things that are personally important, impactful, or interesting for you, to put all of these things together and deliver a great answer. Well, actually, there's 5 reasons why I want to work for Goldman Sachs. Of course, everybody knows that Goldman Sachs is one of the leading investment banks in the world. But actually, when I did my research, I found that there were some great reasons that not a lot of people know about that really motivated me to apply. This is your opportunity, particularly if you're talking to somebody on the phone and you just want to make an impression that makes them think, wow, that person's really done their homework. I didn't even know that about Goldman Sachs. That's so interesting. Tell me some more, because it speaks to the person involved. Goldman Sachs is only going to want to hire people who are A players, and that means that the way that they do anything is the way that they do everything. So if you've really done your homework, done your research, and delivering a really good answer, it's going to speak to the quality of work that you're going to bring when you go and start and work at Goldman Sachs. Question number 4, tell me about a recent piece of business news. Now, as a leading investment bank, Goldman Sachs is going to want people who are basically saturated in the markets, who are really interested in what is going on, are going to be able to talk about it with confidence, whatever be their niche or industry that they're going to go on to work with. What they're not going to want is people who basically aren't really that interested in finance, but they're just attracted to Goldman Sachs because it's somewhere where they can go and make lots of money. There's nothing wrong with making lots of money. They're going to fully support you in that, but they're going to want to see that you're interested. One thing I would say about recent financial news or something like that, it doesn't have to be complicated. You could get something from BBC Business News. It doesn't have to be from Bloomberg. It could be from Reuters. It doesn't have to be from the Financial Times. But it should be something that you feel that you can speak on with authority. So something that's simple and easy to understand. Maybe it's a company that you follow or that you buy from. I would genuinely tend to say that it's better to talk about micro rather than macro, sort of what's going on, but it is also good to have a good feel for what's going on in the markets in general. One of the questions that I came across when I was going through and we were compiling our research note for Goldman Sachs is what's going on in the financial markets right now. So maybe subscribe to a weekly bulletin, or even better, find somebody who writes a blog or a newsletter about the financial markets who presents information in a really easy to understand format that you can digest on a weekly basis. This is something that if you're not already doing, then you can start to do. You don't have to be immersed in CNBC and Bloomberg day in, day out, but it does help if you show a genuine interest and you kind of understand what's happening. So you're understanding about labour market reports or interest rates, inflation rates, these types of things, because otherwise you're not going to be the type of person for them. Question number 5, tell me about a time you have dealt with a difficult co-worker. Now, of course, we could have a wide variety of behavioural questions. Now, here's a quick tip for you. If you're sitting there and thinking, I know that they're going to ask me competency questions, I just don't know what questions they're going to ask me. That's really simple. Just go through the job description. If you look at the things that you're going to be doing, then it's probably a good guess that they're going to be asking you competency questions related to those things. Are you analysing data sets? Then maybe they'll ask you a question about dealing with complexity or dealing with data. If you sit down and go through each of the points on the job description and think, what's a question that they could ask that could be related to this? Of course, they're not going to be asking you questions that aren't related to the job description, right? So that's a really simple thing for you to do. Dealing with a difficult co-worker, this is a question that I love. It's a high-pressured environment. You might have to deal with difficult personalities. As Warren Buffett said, if you're dealing in a market where people are highly competitive, then sometimes, things are going to happen that may not normally happen in a non-competitive environment. So talking about dealing with this, well, first of all, don't take things personally. Generally, if somebody does something that is difficult or I don't particularly like, or maybe I construe that they've been a bit rude, I tend to generally think these days, really got nothing to do with me. I try to understand where they're coming from, and if I feel like this is an issue that needs to be pursued, then I might choose a moment when they're not annoyed or not difficult to say, hey, Steve, can I just talk to you about what happened this morning, because I don't think that that was very helpful. Are you okay? Is there something going on with you? I try and talk to that person one-to-one instead of in front of a group of people, because otherwise that could be shaming or put people on edge if you're kind of confronting them in front of a crowd of people, and really try to understand where they're coming from. And also, to a certain extent, just brush it off and kind of think, well, you know, I'm dealing with a difficult co-worker, but you know, she's great at these things, but she's not so good at these things, and that's okay. I'm not that bothered. Question number 6, give me an example of a time when you worked under pressure. So this is another common competency question that you might expect to be asked at an investment bank, because of course you're under a lot of pressure. You know, markets open, markets close, you have a certain amount of things that you need to get done, and you need to get those things done, and they have to be correct. So when talking about working under pressure, first of all, try and pick an example where it's clear what you had to do, it's clear that it's challenging, and you can clearly demonstrate that there was some form of pressure. Most pressure tends to come from deadline or expectations. I had a tight deadline, something changed, but the expectations on me were that I would do this, this and this required this much work. And then try to systematically take people through the process. A common mistake that I see with this is that people will not take somebody through the steps that they had to take to overcome this pressure, and therefore it doesn't really become very clear. So break it down for me, explain it to me. What were the steps that you had to go through to make sure that you dealt with this situation effectively? So now, just as promised, I'm going to walk you through in a lean video exactly how you can write a winning cover letter for Goldman Sachs to make sure that you get that first round interview.
Hey, so here's a copy of the link, which you can find down in the description below, for the Goldman Sachs cover letter example. So as long as I've known Goldman Sachs, they've required a 300-word cover letter. It's something that a lot of people really struggle with. So I wanted to provide you with an example and a quick walkthrough of a cover letter that worked. You've got someone an interview, basically. So this example comes in about 56 words under the limit. So, sir or madam, I'm currently available to work while pursuing a part-time X at Y. Explains, you know, Goldman Sachs has continued to exceed expectations in the industry, building on its illustrious 150-year history. This is from 2020. This is a little bit about the person themselves. I wanted to change my format slightly when it comes to Goldman Sachs and just give something that just gives a little bit of oomph, like it's a bit more impressive. So I feel like it's a harder thing to do. Then it talks about, you know, the team itself and what it does. You can write in your answer here into the document. And finally, here's an explanation of who are you and what are you doing, some unique facts about Goldman Sachs, a little something that makes you different, what would you do in your job and why, and when could you start. So guys, I hope that you've enjoyed that, you've enjoyed the video. Take this free cover letter template and make it your own to get your first interview. And I will see you in the next video. Bye.